Implementation Committee meeting for January 28th to order, and hopefully we'll get some people to join us to get to a quorum. But with that, let's go ahead and start with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you very much for that. Notifications have gone out for the meeting. I've seen those, so let's move to approval of the minutes from November the 19th.
Mr. Chairman, do we have a quorum?
We don't have a quorum, so I guess we can't do that. So we'll put those off till the next meeting. I'll open it up to citizen comments. Do we have any citizen comments?
No, not at this time.
None in the room. So we're going to have a presentation today by Rebecca Bauer relating to the public water for Northern Beaufort County. It was part of the discussion that we had at our last meeting. I believe, York, you brought that up. And so, Rebecca, are you ready? Would you like to do a presentation for us?
Yes, sir. Can you hear me?
Yeah, now, yes.
Okay. Well, it's nice to meet you guys. My name is Rebecca Bowyer, and today we were going to provide some information to you guys about water availability in the northern part of the county. So I am going to try to flip over to a presentation. It worked just a minute ago. So we'll see if we can get it going for you guys. So are you seeing presentation?
Yes.
Yes.
All right, I'm gonna try to do full screen. Can you still see it?
Yep.
Excellent. So we met with Mr. Glover here a few weeks ago and talked about what was going on in northern Beaufort County and some of the things that you guys were interested in. So wanted to talk about where there is availability in Sheldon and Seabrook and Dale. These were the specific areas that were asked about. And then some of the processes for extending water to those areas. So where are things available? This is a map of northern Beaufort County. As you can see, the blue lines are water lines. Sewer is in green. So along these areas of Dale and Seabrook and Sheldon, we do have some availability, or at least in the Dale area, we do have water and sewer in Seabrook. And then there's not a lot at all there in Sheldon. Actually, are there any questions? Okay. So to serve these areas, what are the means of doing that? So there's basically three means. Front foot assessment, Beaufort County can do extensions. BJWSA can do extensions. So the front foot assessment is a statute allowed by the state. This is where the property owners pay to extend water service or sewer service to their particular area. So the construction for that is assessed with the taxes and placed on there for a 20-year period. It has to be approved by all the property owners because it has to be approved by a majority of the property owners because all property owners have to pay for the work. So in some places it has been successful, but in many places over the years, a lot of the property owners are not in favor of it and they can't get the majority vote. to move forward with the project. But we do have one now that I'm aware of where the property owners did extend service for themselves. The other extension project would basically be, we consider it kind of a development project, but the county can extend services to this area. So we provide the design and construction, and we have a development policy guide to provide general procedures as how to do that. And sometimes that's a better route because there are grants and other funding sources that are available to the municipalities and local governments that are not available to the utility. But there is also partnership opportunities with BJWSA that we've done in the past with various local governments. And then finally, the last one I have on here is our capital improvement program. So every year we reach out to each of the local governments and ask if they have any projects that they would like to put on our CIP list. Most recently that went out, I believe, through the holidays. We've received any requests for this year and are ranking those now, but they get ranked along with all of the other priorities that BJWSA has and has received. So there's a scoring sheet that we give health and environment and criticality to the system. They typically get the highest rankings. So water extension projects don't typically get very high rankings, and therefore do not move as fast as the neighborhoods or the local governments and developers would prefer. So not many get put on this list to move forward. But we do assess it annually. Again, that process is, we're going through it now. So the projects that were listed will get put on our CIP to be board approved this spring. And then we'll repeat the process again next year. We usually reach out again around the holidays, beginning the projects that you guys would be interested in to be placed on the list. And with that, that was pretty much all the information that I had to present. Or are there any questions that you have?
Yeah, this is.
Go ahead, George.
So this is Mitch Mitchell. I have a question. So we look at an area like Sheldon, you know, where I guess the furthest north the water extends is to Kings Neck Road, I think, if I remember the slide correctly. Yeah. And I guess I'm curious to know how's the determination made whether a water project proceeds is determined by having whatever the required percentage of homeowners along the routing approve it versus the county doing it. Because if we look at trying to get water out to Sheldon, you know, all along 721 and then 1721, and trying to get all those folks to approve it, you know, that's kind of like a never gonna happen type project. So could you explain how you determine, or let me say one other thing, or like a project that I'm familiar with, I think Councilman Dawson is familiar with, where we were trying to get water along Stewart Point Road, you know, where I know we've talked to you folks at BJWS a number of times about that, and where the community, you know, members, I could almost see that because it's a more defined area and more of a community situation. But you know, along the main thoroughfare of 21 and 17th, going out to Sheldon, you know, could you determine, share with me just how, you know, whether it's a county project or a community project is determined?
It's so the state statute and tells us how to do I'll call it the front footage assessment. So basically the people that would like to have water and sewer reach out to us. There's an iterative process that we go through where we have to figure out where the utilities are and where the project would extend. And every person along that route has to get or is reached out to so that they can be involved. Again, because if the project is successful, then everybody along the route has to contribute to the installation of the utility. And again, that's state law. Anybody can request it, and we look into it. There, like I said, several steps to it, but we will go through and give approximate cost if we get that far in the process. And again, Stewart Point is far more feasible for, like you said, the community, as opposed to extending it to Sheldon with the number of people that you would have to get involved in that project. If somebody in Sheldon were to reach out and ask for a front footage assessment project.
Well, I don't want to hog the time, but I want to follow up with the second part of that question. You know, and maybe this is something more for the county to answer, but I guess the question is, if you look at Highway 21, say from Kings Neck Road going towards Sheldon, past Gardens Corner and so forth, you know, at what point, you know, does it become more of a general economic interest for the county to do something like that? Because I could see that, let's say, water is extended along 1721, and then you have a spur that goes off into this area right in the heart of Sheldon that we call Bailey, or some of the spur roads that come off there. Then it becomes a community thing. But if you look at trying to get everyone from Kings Neck Road all the way to, you know, say the heart of Sheldon there where the little store and Canaan Church is, and get all of those folks, you know, it just becomes such a challenging task to get all of those folks on board, which kind of stifles some of the other things that could happen in that northern area if water were available.
Let me chime in if I may. This is Councilman Gerald Dawson. When we talk about water extension into the northern part of Beaufort County, I don't hear this discussion leading toward the St. Helena area, and I find that rather fascinating. But nevertheless, over the years, I've had the support of council to support me in getting water lines extension into the Dale community. We've done 3 community development block grants through LCOG. LCOG initiated the system, the process. But to drive this, to even get started, you have to have community interest and desire. And so if the interest and the desire is not there, then as far as I'm concerned, and the people that I represent, it's a moot point. It's a moot discussion. In addition to that, extending water and sewer, but right now we're just talking about water. Extending water across the Whale Branch Bridge, the Whale Branch River is being restricted by the comprehensive plan. The comprehensive plan clearly states that water and sewer is not allowed on the northern side of the Whale Branch River. And so you've got those 2 obstacles you're dealing with: community interest and the comprehensive plan. I made 2 attempts to get the water lines extended from Highway 21 in the Seabrook area and the Stewart Point area into the Stewart Point community. I made 2 attempts, and I couldn't get the majority of the citizens in the Stewart Point community to support the community block grant LCOG assistance of us getting the water into that community. And so I've had 1 or 2 requests to make a 3rd attempt, and I'm very apprehensive of trying to go down that route again. I'm not trying to force water into any community, and so that's why I say this thing is driven, as far as my representation is concerned, is driven by the community showing an interest and a desire to have public water.
Let me chime in, and if a request coming forward offends anybody, I apologize. However, I asked this
committee here to look at water in rural communities. And one of the primary focus of that was to look at fire protection in rural areas. And it just seems to me that when you have an issue with fire and you don't have a supply of water, you dealing with a house that's going to just burn down, because once the fire department is there with whatever water's on their truck, that's the extent of that. I've also would like to share with you that I did ask for St. Helena to be included, because there are pockets of St. Helena that don't have right now water service, and I want to fill those gaps in. Going beyond that, I'm also looking at areas on St. Helena that have water lines but don't have the capacity to handle fire hydrants, and I want to look at improving that as well. So I do have an interest here with water in areas that are not completed on St. Helena, and two, where there are water lines, expanding those lines so that it will have the capacity for fire hydrants. And I don't see that in your presentation, but I just want you to know, Rebecca, that St. Helena has pockets that needs to be completed, and I hope that Beaufort Jasper Water will look at that. Now, my problem right now is that what you're saying to me, unless it's a county project, Beaufort Jasper Water Authority will have a difficult time completing water lines, because every property owner has to sign and commit to that. So if we're going to do something for St. Helena, I think we probably need to go the county route with grants, et cetera, et cetera. And what we're looking for is those areas on St. Helena, and I speak for St. Helena, that are not being serviced at this time, and what will it cost to have that done, and so that I can advocate for funding for those areas. That's where I am.
Let me follow up and on some of my previous statement as far as efforts of extending water into the rural communities on the northern part of the county. I briefed you about my situation of trying to extend water into the Stewart Point community. Prior to us being hit with the pandemic, I also made an attempt to extend the water lines into the Seabrook community on the opposite side of Highway 21 from the Stewart Point community, and that was unsuccessful. Now, I do know that the folks on the far end of the Seabrook community, Seabrook Point subdivision, they have overwhelming desire for water extensions into their subdivision. But the problem that we have to deal with there is that private subdivisions do not qualify for the Community Development Block Grant program that is offered through the Low Country Council of Governments. And so having had several discussions with members from the Seabrook Point community, Beaufort Jasper has offered to extend the water line into the community, but at the expense of the citizens in the subdivision. And that didn't go over too well. Let's say that was unacceptable to the Seabrook Point community. And so that's where we are as far as trying to get water into these rural communities. And I know fire is a driving force. Fire is a major concern for all of us. But then again, you deal with state statutes and then the comprehensive plan from the local entity that has restrictions on actually what we can do with water extensions into these communities. Now, I will say of all the projects that we were able to accomplish in the Dale community was due to the fact that there were hazard as far as contamination in the drinking water, contamination, rust, and things of that nature. And so we were able to go ahead and get water extended into the communities based upon the hazard of the potable water or the drinking water not being conducive for home consumptions.
I just wanted to offer a point of clarification that our comprehensive plan does not restrict water extension into rural. It just restricts sewer. So, I mean, that's not an obstacle, these water line extensions.
All right, thanks, Rob. I stand
Okay.
corrected.
No,
Thank you,
that's
sir.
okay.
Stephen?
Becca, thank you for being here and for the presentation this morning. Councilman Glover's comments about capacity piqued a question in my mind. You've got existing water lines down Keens Neck Road, but can you talk a little bit about the capacity of those lines? And is there significant existing capacity?
Some of those lines would be able to serve those areas. As far as extending it up to Sheldon, there probably is not capacity in those lines now.
Rebecca, let's say hypothetically the county wanted to purchase a brownfield industrial site and create a new industrial park along Keens Neck. Is there enough capacity currently to service that type of user?
You said for an industrial park?
Yes, ma'am.
I guess it would really depend on what you were using. Most of the industrial parks around here seem to be fire demands as opposed to actual production waters. So it's a possibility, but it would really, we'd have to look at what's there. But there is capacity in the line for some development.
Thank you.
Mike had a question.
How large of pipe do you have coming across the Whale Branch? Do you know?
I can look it up. When I stop sharing the screen, just take me a minute here.
How would you increase capacity in that area? Is it a water tower or larger lines? Combination.
You know, they're doing some really cool stuff with the underground aquifer
Oh,
storage.
Mike?
Yes.
Well, they're looking that up. Just a quick question. If it was a county-initiated project, county-initiated, would all the property owners along the route, the extension route, have to tie on? That's,
I don't think so.
I mean, that's a question I think
Yeah.
that would be good to.
Yeah, if it's a county-initiated project, the county would have the ability to go to LOCOG to get grant funding. Is that right, Rebecca? Right.
That is correct. The water main across Whale Branch is a 16-inch pipe, so it definitely has some capacity there. But we can always look into some specific questions if you have those and get back to you. And that was one of the things we talked about with the St. Helena as well, that this focus today was on the Seabrook, Dale, Sheldon area, and that we would likely have more conversations on some of the St. Helena areas as well.
Do I initiate that conversation with you?
Sure, if I'm here to provide information for you. So if there's things that, information that we can provide, we can get that to you for your discussion purposes.
I think what would be helpful, and I don't know if we have access to the water lines on St. Helena, but then we would, our department can assist in drawing up areas that are not served currently.
I think we have the GIS layers.
Okay.
Let's keep going with that question about if it's a county project with or without CDBG funds, would the owners, all the owners along that route be required to tie in, same as they would if it was the front footage assessment? Or would the county have the option to say, well, just people who want to, or, in 10 years you need, or what are the, let's say, the constraints or the opportunities there?
So the way our policies are currently written is that the county would be considered a developer and you would extend to your development. So there is not anything currently in place that says that everybody would have to tie on if the county extended services. But we would be concerned about water quality. So making sure that the water is circulating and is getting used and is not sitting stagnant in these lines. So that would be looked at as part of the design for who all would be using the line.
I think the other component of that is whether the CDBG grant would require mandatory tap-in for people within a certain distance. Our funding source might require that.
Can Stephanie
Let me ask Ms. Boyer a question. You said that under the front foot assessment program, the lines would be extended in the community, but not everyone is required to tap in?
No, everybody is required to tap in that is along the line.
Okay, all right. I misunderstood you then. Yeah, because clearly the front foot assessment, every property owner along that route that line run, property is assessed to help pay for the installation of that line, right?
That is correct.
Okay.
Other comments or discussion? Anything from the public?
No,
Yes, sir, if I may.
sorry.
Certainly.
Becca, Chief Klein with Ladies Island St. Helena Fire District. First request to you would be 12, 15 years ago, the unincorporated fire districts were included in the letter for CIP improvements. Can we get back on that list?
Yes. Yes, sir.
All right. The other thing is I'd love to be involved, and when it comes to Ladies Island, St. Helena, help identify those areas. We have some, as Mr. Glover said, some pockets that do not have water lines, but we also have many areas that have adequate sized water lines, but not adequate number of hydrants. And I'm not putting that blame on Beaufort Jasper. Let's just say 40 plus years ago, the infrastructure was put in, and let's just say down Eddings Point Road, there was nothing there. Okay, and maybe just a couple hydrants were dropped. Where today there is, and again, it's 30 plus years ago, lack of codes and ordinances, and truly individual homeowners purchasing a piece of property down a long dirt road. I don't know how we address that, how we fix that. Warsaw in particular, the water lines are there. There's a couple hydrants in Warsaw, but the loop on Warsaw, my understanding, has a 4-inch water line that would not support fire hydrants. And how do we address that? I would also submit to you that, yes, community block grants. I would also say ARPA and the funding there. And South Carolina Rural Infrastructure Authority also does grants. And I don't know if Beaufort Jasper uses any of that, or if that's something that has to be initiated by the county.
So, so there are areas that don't have lines at all. So those areas there on St. Helena or anywhere else would go through this same process that we're discussing here for Sheldon and Dale and Seabrook. So those are the basic options there. In general, the developers put in the line and extend it. So the county, again, acting in that regard, can do that. You are correct that there are lines in places that don't have, our purpose is for flushing the lines for water quality. You're looking at it from a little bit different perspective. So our current developer policy and procedure manual does allow for you to come in and ask for hydrants. And I believe that I can get you the information on that, but we do allow to request for hydrants from the local municipalities. So if there's an area that does not have adequate, they're spaced, whatever, every couple thousand feet, we can come back in and look at those areas to put in more hydrants. There is concern there that about the number of hydrants, I'll say being realistic for fire protection, because we have to maintain the hydrants long-term. We would ask that, we try not to put a whole cluster, within 100 feet, 300 feet of each other, and you have 3 or 4 hydrants. But again, there are areas where they're spaced every 2,000 feet. And I know ISO looks at the 1,000-foot interval. So definitely some opportunities there to work together. In areas that have the undersized lines, where they're 4 inches or less, and some have the 2-inch extensions. Those right there, again, fire protection at this point is not our main focus. We look at health and safety and water quality. So for us getting water to the homes, they meet our current standards, but they can be upsized as well. Those projects can be put in for us. Again, they typically rank low against our other projects that are more health oriented or for sewer for environmental concerns. But there's opportunities again for the community or the government here to put in larger size lines to serve if fire protection is a way that the county would like to go.
I would say, a lot of people want to be in the rural area, and they love the rural area, and they don't think about hydrants and fire protection until they have a fire. And then they want to know where the hydrants are. And I just want to make something clear, as the fire service in general here responds with water capabilities. They carry in water. Some of us have tankers that can have additional water, and we do a shuttle operation and so forth. A lot has to do with the stage of fire and whether the house is going to be completely consumed or not, and at the timeliness of us receiving the call. But I would love to be involved with Beaufort Jasper. I would love to identify those areas and work towards a plan, whether it's ARPA, whether it's South Carolina Rural Infrastructure, whether it's county CIP, and a little bit every year that goes towards, some of our areas, Mr. Glover, as you know, all we need is some additional hydrants. And I think with a little bit of money, we can put a bunch of hydrants in. And I say a little bit, $500,000, $250,000, or whatever it may be, that we can address those areas. It's the rural nature of the unincorporated county is, and we discussed it at SRT the other day, the county has ordinances and requirements, but 4 homes or less is a minor subdivision, does not require the developer to put in the infrastructure. 5 homes or more does. So you can have pockets of these little smaller developments, and then you also have, I buy 10 acres, I have a beautiful home at the end of that 10 acres on deep water, and later on I subdivide. And I add a house here or there. All of a sudden, we got 6 or 8 houses down that private road, and there's no water line or hydrant anywhere close. I would never propose multiple hydrants in a closed area. 1,000-foot spacing is appropriate. Theoretically, if all the homes were on the frontage street, they would make them 500 foot from a hydrant, which would be perfect for our operations. So I look forward to working with Beaufort Jasper and Becca and Mr. Glover if I can.
Thank you.
I think I kind of see like maybe the first step is mapping this, looking at, there's 3 areas with no water, areas with water that need hydrants, and that's something we could work with Beaufort Jasper with the fire district on. And then areas that have undersized lines, which, if you can, kind of work with Beaufort Jasper with the fire district to know what are undersized that would have, be able to support a hydrant. And I think that first step would be a map and inventory of these areas. And then I guess the next thing would be trying to prioritize and figure out how to go after money.
And that's where I am right now. And it's, there's opportunity, I think, because of ARPA and all the funding, infrastructure funding that are coming. And I don't want to miss out on, if I can get one line in, I think it's worth the effort. If I can get all done, it'd be great. But I don't want to miss the opportunity not to do something when it's here. And so if nothing else comes out of this committee, if you would direct staff to start outlining areas of concern and bring back here as a recommendation, I would appreciate that. And I can work with staff to basically, and chief, to identify areas on St. Helena and Ladies Island that are sort of missing and try to close those gaps.
Absolutely. I think that's the way to go.
Do we have areas of northern Port Royal Island that are not served? Because I kind of know what the map of Sheldon is, but there are parts of Grays Hill or Clarendon?
Yes.
Yes, there are.
Okay. And we kind of know what's going on with north of the Whale Branch.
And I promise not to be selfish, we'll include the other fire districts.
Don't overextend yourself, chief.
So is that something we want to stand up as a committee, or is that something that's just going to be under the county?
Well, respectfully, these things are both well outside of the growth boundaries, and while this is another Northern Regional Planning Committee, I see this as mostly a county responsibility. I'm not sure where I am supportive of providing better access for fire coverage for citizens in the rural areas. Don't get me wrong, but I guess as a piece of political advice to my two county council colleagues here, the majority of the rest of your council have to be supported to move these priorities forward. And so my suggestion would be that your county committees, whether that's public facilities or, one of those, that might be a more appropriate body to run it through so that you make sure you're bringing the rest of your council along with you as you start to find funding and keep this being a priority. I mean, I'm certainly happy to have it here, but I'd like to see it successful.
Will do, okay.
Any further discussion?
So what's the next step here? Is it the next step is to take this to the county process, to natural resources, or for the planning to provide some mapping to them, or a discussion on moving forward at the county level? I'm just trying to understand what the next steps are here.
Well,
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
I think we got some work to do before we go before subcommittees.
Yeah. But it'll be in the county domain. Yes, sir.
Any further discussion?
Thank you, Becca.
Thank you very much, Rebecca.
Thank you.
Appreciate
Very
it.
informative, very informative. Thank you.
Thank you, and if you need our help, we're glad to serve, and just have your staff reach out to us, or we'll be glad to present information again at a future meeting if there's another specific area or even general areas to discuss.
Will do. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we'll move, before we move on to the next one, I guess we do have a quorum, so
You do?
I believe so, with Mr. Dawson joining us.
He's always with us. We're still a short one.
We are?
Yeah. Yes.
You're right, we are. Sorry about that. Okay, so we'll move on to our discussion items. The first one is growth boundaries with the Eustis Community Land Use Plan. And Rob, I think did you put that one on?
Yeah, I just wanted to kind of I think this is the first meeting we've had since we had a sit-down meeting with the city, over at the city, I think that was in October. But basically, we've had, since the Ladies Island plan has been adopted, this proposal to move the growth boundary, which is currently at Chowan Creek, to move it westward to the eastern boundary of Walmart. in hopes of kind of providing a little more of a rural buffer before getting over to St. Helena Island. Kind of working with the city and their concerns about land that is, and I'm speaking, I guess, on behalf of, what you had mentioned at the meeting, but the city has concerns that they already have land in the city over in distant islands and Eustis Plantation, that because if we move the growth boundaries, they would be forever a donut hole. And so we kind of agreed that a step that we could take that would hopefully have the same results would be to put together some sort of joint land use plan for the Eustis community. If the city and the county share the same vision for what land should be in the Eustis community, we agree on a future land use plan. So regardless of annexation, it's, we're going to have the same result as far as development potential in that area. And so, what we're, I think that that's a viable option. I think if that plan were undertaken, of course, it needs to be community-based. Once again, go back to the community and make sure that, we're doing something that is, desirable to what they would like to see, but also that plan, that if it does get adopted, that be something that is part of the intergovernmental agreement for the Northern Regional Plan. So we have our growth boundary, all the details of what happens within and outside the growth boundary, and then we have this land use component for the Eustis community. That was kind of my takeaway from that meeting, and I wanted to kind of brief this group with that and see how we ought to move forward on that.
And I believe that was going to be a combination of city staff and county staff to develop that land use planning.
How far south does that go, that survey area? I mean, Eustis is it's quite a large area, actually.
Yeah, so I guess what we would be looking at is that area that,
Walmart to the Channel Creek Bridge, right?
yeah, that would be as far as east to west, but I think you have water and marsh on the north, and on the south, I guess it would take in distant island, Eustis Plantation, but it's fairly well defined by geography.
And the existing growth boundaries.
Yeah.
So is that something the county would initiate in terms of getting the city on board with that project?
I would hope the city and the county staff would come to some type of recommendation to bring forward. Now, right now the county, as I understand it, and the city has an agreement to allow the boundary to be extended to the Chowing Creek. And that was done 10 years or so ago.
2006, 8.
Well,
More than 10 years.
Northern Regional Plan was adopted 2007, and I can't remember the intergovernmental agreement was about a year.
Sort of shortly after that. And, politics have changed, and a lot of new faces have shown up, and, maybe there's a time to either solidify that or change it. And I like the conversation. Yeah.
Yeah, I do too. And I think my heartburn has always been that, for better or worse, some portion of Distant Island is in the city. Mm-hmm. So we run garbage trucks out there. If there's a call for police service, we run an officer out there now. And, if we concede the growth boundaries, then that's sort of meaning that all those services are going to have to ride past unincorporated county to get to service prison. That's not very efficient in how we deliver service. On the other side, I absolutely understand, especially your concern, Councilman Glover, about having that be, significant urban density along that corridor. And I think from the city's standpoint of transect-based zoning and development moving forward, it should be intense in the core of the city and then step down as we get approaching the rural areas. So I think it makes a lot of sense for Walmart being the most intense, and then it's sort of decreasing and becoming more rural as it gets to Chowan Creek. You know, one of the challenges we have right now is that from the city standpoint, I don't know if we have a zoning that currently matches the county zoning that is across those sites, because we've offered that we would try to find a zoning that matches. So regardless of the jurisdiction, it's still going to be sort of a rural-informed development that occurs, if it occurs at all. I drove through there last week, just in advance of this conversation, to look at, you know, just the potential for development, the parcels. It's awfully low.
Yeah.
And my hope of hopes is that the fill ordinances that the county has passed and the city has passed will preclude some development, again, regardless of jurisdiction, in that area because of how low it is. So regardless of zoning, if the fill, you know, Rob, you could probably speak to that better than I could, but I hope we've put some protections in place, jointly working together.
Yeah.
But I'll also say, you know, as Ladies Island and the Sea Islands continue to grow, I think we've got to have a more open conversation about what is the right level of commercial, you know, retail, restaurant, commercial development on the island, because I'm a believer of the more that we can put appropriate, right, scale commercial development on that corridor especially, the better it helps keep people on the Sea Islands and not having to cross the two bridges that are continuing to face strain. So I think from the city standpoint, we'd love to work with county staff to figure out how we do that land use plan, similar to the Ladies Island Village Master Plan, which we're going to talk about next, and a city commitment that and I think it's also important to remember that property owners have to petition to come in, right? We don't just get to go take and say, we're going to take Eustis and you're coming into the city whether you like it or not.
Yeah.
Those property owners have to want to be in the city and have to come to us and say, hey, bring us in. And so I want to be careful about assuming that property owners either do want to come in or don't want to come in. I mean, it's similar to the water conversation. We all sit around here and think public water or annexation might be a great thing, but if property owners and residents in these corridors are absolutely opposed to it, you know, we sort of have to respect that. So setting the public table that protects us one way or the other, I think is a good thing.
So at the same time, Mayor, that when you look at annexation, you need to make sure that those elements are included in annexation, because if you extend based on line of sight, you know, you got the marshland, and so you pick up a distant island. So when you do that, you already said we're gonna leave a donut hole there, because in order to get to distant island, you have to come into the county. So just, you know, keep that in mind.
Oh, no, hey, and I'm on record a dozen times saying, you know, I wish the city would have never crossed that river back in 1978. And, you know, in hindsight, we really should have focused on the core urban area of the city and sort of the basic format on Port Royal Island. But, you know, for better or worse, you know, Henry Chambers, the mayor at the time, they annexed. There was, like I said, kind of a nasty fight with the Historic Preservation Group at the time, and that actually established some state annexation laws that you could annex line of sight, because I think that was a question mark at the time. So I don't like it. I've actually asked, can we unannex and give some portions back, and have never been able to get a clear answer that there's a mechanism for us to be able to do that. So, you know, we find ourselves in this boat together.
No, and I said earlier, there are new players on the scene right now, and
right.
You know, and so the conversation is a welcome conversation for me.
But I lay awake at night thinking about the Ladies Island plan, the data that was captured, that, you know, 6,000 plus residential units today, a potential for an additional 8,000 units. We're probably between the city and county building somewhere around 300 units a year. It's just me pulling a number out of thin air. But I'm hearing from my residents on the Woods Memorial side of the bridge that, you know, significant delays and issues with bridge openings and more traffic density. I think Port Royal's got an issue on the McTier side of the bridge. So we're all in this together on how we best manage the Sea Islands, because it affects all of us. I personally think we've got to figure out how to allow more commercial development in a responsible, again, scaled way for Sea Island residents. We need to continue to working to bring densities down where we can in the rural parts of the Sea Island islands. You know, no more upzoning in the rural parts of the area. And I don't know if you saw the Island News, there was an op-ed that was recently written about the third crossing.
Oh, yeah.
And, you know, I'm trying to switch it a little bit, that if we think we have the willingness to spend $200, $300, $400 million, I mean, pick a number, right? What's Hilton Head Bridge is gonna cost? 300 million? If we have the willingness to spend $300 million to do a significant amount of environmental damage, accelerate development on the Sea Islands, if we put that in somewhere on the northern part of the island, well, why don't we raise that money and then go buy down development densities? Right? How much development density could we buy on Ladies Island and St. Helena for $300 million?
A bunch.
Huh?
A bunch.
I mean, I just think we've got to think a little differently. We can't road and bridge our way out of this mess. And actually, roads and bridges may actually induce and accelerate demand and growth.
Yeah.
So I think we have to be very careful about what we do there and take a more holistic view of how these communities develop, which is why I'm a big champion of the Ladies Island Village Center Master Plan.
Well, let me just say this, that in less than 2 weeks, Chief can speak to this, traffic stopped for at least 3-4 hours on St. Helena. And people couldn't get to work, couldn't get access to doctors.
One of my employees,
Okay.
half day out.
And we have to address that problem. That's what I'm thinking. I'm looking for the future. How do we address that without expanding the road capacity too much to allow some kind of flowing? So I think it's all part of a conversation that we got to move forward. But my residents, my citizens are saying we got stuck, and it happened 2 weeks in a row.
Yeah, so, and Mr. Chair, if I may, we're made up of islands. There's choke points. When you have an accident anywhere in that Chowan Creek area, there's no way around it. I will tell you, and I'm very proud to tell you this, because I was on that scene, that within 15 minutes, we had 1 lane of traffic flowing. Now, the entire road was blocked by the overturned dump truck and the vehicle, the other vehicle that was involved. We actually pulled a sign over the side of the road and had traffic running up in the grass because it was this side of the Chowan Creek Bridge. It wasn't actually on the bridge. Very proud to tell you that in 15 minutes, and that really was waiting on the ambulance to transport the critically ill person. But within 15 minutes, we had 1 lane of traffic, and working with Beaufort County Sheriff's Department, we were alternating. But the fact of the matter is that's a choke point, and you have all those people that are either going out to Harbor Hunting and Fripp to work or coming in from St. Helena to work. Points unknown, I don't know, but you know, we do the absolute best we can, but there's several choke points on Sea Island Parkway that you just cannot get around. There's not an alternate route to go around and flow traffic. And we'll continue to work with that and work as hard as we can, but you're gonna have somebody that comes out to go to work at 8 o'clock, the accident happened at 7:30, and they're gonna get traffic and sit for a long time. The second incident was at the light at Walmart. And we were able, again, very quickly divert traffic. City PD and Sheriff's Department and I worked very well and put up cones, and we were able to divert traffic. But it's a choke point, so it's gonna take a long time to get around that.
Yeah, and then all I'm saying is that, you know, we need to look at ways of improving that so we can alleviate the length of time, you know. Yeah.
I mean, I do think that the 9 projects that are teed up that were passed in 2018 will help with that. I mean, obviously the bridge is the bridge, and Chowan Creek Bridge is probably going to be a choke point. But once you get across the bridge towards Ladies Island, around the Walmart, creating these different opportunities to bypass the main intersection, I think will hopefully create some efficiency and not create such a bottleneck that we have currently.
I think we've trailed off into
Yes, sir.
we've got 2 different discussions.
They're all.
It was in the Eustis community.
Yeah, they're obviously interrelated, but I'd like to step back and separate them out a little bit here, because I think we do have an action item that can be accomplished with the county and the city in talking about land use. And that whole discussion is important. And so I guess what I'm wondering now is, how does that get, obviously we haven't done anything since October when we had that initial discussion. We're moving that discussion forward to today. How do we get an action plan moving to actually start to do that land use planning?
It's time, I mean, if we're, I think I'm in agreement, and it's timely for the city because, we passed our form-based code in 2017, 2018. I'm a huge fan of the form-based code. I'm a huge fan of the transects. But I think what we found is that we need some slight modifications to several of our zoning classes. You've heard me say before that we go from like T4N, T4 neighborhood, that allows some pretty limited commercial density, and then the jump is to T5 UC, which is urban corridor. It's 5 stories, very intense, very urban. And to me, that's too broad of a jump. There needs to be a bit of a middle category there that softens that transition to some of our traditional neighborhoods. The Eustis community is a perfect example. You wouldn't dare go to a county T2 to a T5. I mean, that's just too hard of a line. So internally the city, not just in our outside areas of our growth boundaries, but around some of our core city areas, we're finding that there's too hard of a transition. We've got to figure out how to soften some of those things to allow mixed use, to allow commercial and residential to function together, but again, to be at a scale that is appropriate for existing neighborhoods. So again, I say it's timely because I think those things could probably be sort of worked together, and the city's already open to looking at some different sort of zoning classes, I guess what you call it.
Yeah, my comment, Mike, just for a second. I mean, when this discussion went before the steering committee on the Ladies Island plan, and we've had all these discussions about the growth boundary. I think an agreement between the two jurisdictions would be really useful if we could set a bright line as to where the higher zoning stops. We keep talking about the eastern edge of Walmart, and I keep getting bothered by that big for sale sign sitting right on the edge of that property.
Well, and that one's on, it's in a development agreement.
That's right.
So there's yes, it's a part of the airport junction HUD that came in with Distant Island, the Walmart, all that came in together back in 2008, I guess. Oh. And it's a development agreement with a local property owner that has protected densities. I'm not sure what they are, but regardless of what we do with zoning, unless we can crack open that development agreement and force them to do something different, we're sort of beholden to a legacy PUD.
Well, I think you're right, Mayor. I think there is lowland. It's a lot of wetlands back there. It's very difficult to develop anywhere past about almost a quarter or a half an acre back from the main roadway. I think the fill ordinance will help, but I think to be able to look at that in the context of what we're trying to do out there, keeping in mind we still got the second chunk of the airport junction development there on the south side of CLN Parkway. They haven't turned a shovel full of dirt, but it's been approved to deal with. And to the extent that we can ensure, what we're trying to do is keep that transition between Walmart and Shawan Creek Bridge clean. That's the goal. And I think an intergovernmental agreement, or however it has to be handled, would be.
Well, and that's really what we're talking about, because you start with the land use planning and you get an agreement between the county and the city of what the appropriate land use is, and then based on land use, you can redevelop your zoning ordinances and the more granular information that needs to go along with that. But you start out with getting to the land use. So if we can start with that and get that going as soon as possible, then we can reflect on that with the more granular.
Unfortunately, don't see anybody from my community and economic development department here. Anybody on?
Emily's.
Emily.
Sorry.
Oh,
I'm new.
hi.
I'm a
I'm
planner
sorry.
at the city.
Yeah, duh.
I'm sitting in for Dan today. So.
Okay. Well, what do you think? You ready to do a land use plan with the county on the Eustis community?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know that I can speak for the county. I'm very new, but
I'm not actually speaking for the county, I'm actually speaking for the city.
The city, sorry. Not the county. I don't work for the county. I think that would be a good idea. I think it would be great to collaborate on.
Well, they're finishing up with the comprehensive plan, so now they got time on their hands.
I would appreciate that, and at least the conversation can get started, and then we can go from there and stuff, so.
Yeah, I was thinking that there's kind of two ways to approach this. One is the county we just adopted a comprehensive plan. We specifically deal with the uses community, where before, I believe our future land use map in our comp plan had it yellow or residential all the way to Chowan Creek. We've changed that to rural in our future land use map. So one way would be just to make this more of a staff level discussion about if we agreed on this land use plan for Eustis, what tools would be necessary for the city to adopt, if land is annexed. Or, the other step would be to go into the community. I would say the one downside to that is that I think that there are probably about some residents' real apprehension about city annexation, and that kind of opens up that whole.
Sure.
Yeah, so I think the question is this something that is more of a staff-driven process following an already, a comprehensive plan that's already gone through public review, or is this something where we do a community-based plan?
My suggestion would be that we started out with the staff-led planning, that you bring the results of that planning back to NERPIC. Let us all take a look at that. A decision as to whether how that proceeds past that point then can be decided. But it's got, in my mind, so that we're not chasing our tails. We've already got a lot of the groundwork done on it. Let's let the staff push it forward, get us to a point where we can all individually take a look at it, agree, disagree, modify, and then decide what a next step might be, if there is any next step to that.
I generally agree with that. Rob, as I recall, and I haven't looked at it in a while, the zoning along there is mostly, is it T2 rural commercial?
It's T2 rural. I think it's a combination of T2 rural and T2 rural neighborhood, and this is a legacy going all the way back to '99. But rural neighborhood applies to the smaller properties and gives small property owners greater flexibility. But
with your comp plan, take the city out of the equation, right?
Yeah.
Say we're not talking about annexations or anything. With your new comp plan, would you anticipate zoning changes along the corridor, or do you feel like the zoning that exists today in the county is appropriate for the future?
It would be our position as staff that we would not recommend any upzoning, because we have that area basically east of Walmart is rural. So we would be, any kind of.
Or how about downzoning? Or is there nowhere to go?
I would say, it's a rural residential community, so we already have, some smaller properties, kind of similar to the pattern of development you have on St. Helena. I don't know that downzoning would be appropriate, I'd say. And, the way our comprehensive plan is, we would not recommend any change in zoning in that area.
So I guess my point is, if the county and the residents are happy with the zoning that exists today, I think for the city standpoint, how do we most closely match a zoning class that aligns with what you offer today, right? Because the concern for all of us is the upzoning, right?
Yeah.
So I think to your point, I think staff's getting together and just sort of comparing the details. Maybe there's some nuanced changes to some parts of the corridor, but for the most part, it would be the same.
Yeah, and it's really not it's not a change to the community, because we're not changing the land use policies. We're just saying, if anything, they're getting greater protection because of the city annexes.
Exactly.
We're agreeing to this framework for the community. So I think in that standpoint, because we just did a comprehensive plan, it makes sense to do it at the staff level and just follow,
Yeah, I think the most important thing to me is that all the basics are probably there. We're probably in good shape. However, because it is an area that is both city and county, I think a meeting of the minds, making sure we're agreeing on everything, is probably the most important part of agreeing on the land use. And pointing out the specific areas that are problematic, if you will, and how, and what staff's recommendations are to deal with that if in fact those are, as pointed out, Distant Island as an example.
Yeah, I mean, I'd say keep it simple, and it's developing the tools that we currently don't have at that lower end of the transect. And
I agree.
So we have an action item list. Is this something that the board would like to just add to the action item list as something that's going to be done, and then we get a report on that until we get something that comes back to NERPIC as a position report by staff?
I agree.
Okay, let's do that.
Mike?
Yes.
As a comment, the action item list, item number 1, actually gets into this particular issue. We've been talking a long time about changing or modifying or updating the plan and reviewing a 90-page document. The guts of that document really pertain to intergovernmental agreements, growth boundaries, and the base conditions, regional growth. This particular issue and uses could be that update or modification as we go forward based on the agreements reached. And there are a couple of other areas like the northern regional part of Ladies Island. That's another consideration for intergovernmental agreements and potential growth and expansion. And yet there's a third one, which is what's going on over in the embassy. So my point being is that if you're looking for an action item, I think this pertains to the Northern Regional Implementation Plan agreements established by resolution back in 2009. This issue we're discussing now and the other two I mentioned would be a perfect action item to list as more specificity under item 1.
I understand what you're saying. I guess originally when we were taking a look at this, we were looking at the actual written mandate. This is information that kind of will go into the written mandate.
Exactly.
And so I still see it as a separate item, but it's definitely interrelated to that.
or maybe this is A, B, and C under that item.
Yeah, that's what I think.
This would be A, the Eustis Community Plan.
Okay.
And then B, Northern Ladies Island, C, Yemassee.
Fair enough, because those need to be completed before we get the final wording on the mandate, is what you're saying.
Yes.
Or we do it in steps.
Yeah.
Because the
Well,
Yemassee might be.
I think you're right. I think it needs to be done in steps in order to get to the end. The mandate would be the final written document.
Exactly.
Okay, that's fine. We'll go ahead and do that. And Ed, maybe you can give us the B and C components to that you were discussing that I can stick in here then.
Rob and I had a discussion about this earlier, and I think he can address the specificity of what would go in there under B and C. I'm more familiar with it than me. But certainly, yes, those specific actions are things we need to keep on our plate for their impacts on the municipalities and the county.
Thank you. Any further discussion on the Eustis community boundary discussions? Okay, seeing none, we'll move on. Ladies Island Village Center master plan, and if you recall, there were two separate items that were presented for the village center. One related specifically to the village center itself, and another one related to the transportation element for that, both of which were moved forward and voted unanimously to move on to next steps. So with that, I'll turn to Rob here to discuss the village center plan.
Okay, well, we had a meeting, I guess, several months ago where we sat down with the county administrator, with different council representatives to talk about the commitment to Village Center Master Plan. And so one of the takeaways of that meeting, or the direction that we got from the county administrator, is to look at what steps can we take as staff, or do some sort of concentrated staff level work that could feed into some of the desired outcomes that we want from the Village Center Master Plan. And I think from sitting down with Mike Tomey and, you know, talking about what you would like to see come out of this, the number one thing would be, I guess, this kind of in analyzing the zoning in the Village Center and identifying areas where the city and the county have discrepancies, or where, you know, there's kind of a difference of vision, and coming up with steps forward, whether it's an overlay or reworking the districts. But, you know, that, and I'll say that I think we're closer to that goal than maybe is perceived, because we both have transect zones on Ladies Island. So, you know, we already had that vision of walkable community and the right zoning tools to make that happen. But I think we're already, you know, kind of identifying things that were that are concerns, like drive-throughs, you know, or how do we handle, you know, that's just a hypothetical situation again. You know, and so using this as an opportunity to address that. I think the other one is looking at all the improvements that we anticipate through the petty sales tax projects. You know, we're going to be creating this network of streets, but there's still an opportunity for interconnectivity in the community, and then also that working as access management on the Sea Island Parkway, you know, so connecting businesses to signalize intersections and how that can be accomplished. And so one of the thoughts we had is we could maybe do a concentrated effort rather than this be some long protracted, but treat it more like a workshop, have it largely staff initiated with assistance from the people who have been involved with the implementation of the Ladies Island plan, and then hire somebody as a facilitator who could help, I guess, guide the discussion and then produce some visual results of this, you know. But I would say something that is much more staff initiated, with somebody coming in professionally to act more as a facilitator. And so what we anticipate is kicking this off and finishing it within most of the work is concentrated in a few days, but, you know, beginning to end, we're looking at something that would be no more than a month to having a very clear path forward after we do the work. Would you say that was kind of what we had talked about?
Yeah, I agree with you, Rob. And I had done a mock-up RFP that included a lot of the information about what we have already accomplished with all of the other previous planning processes that have been very public, by the way, as well. A lot of public input into those. This is taking a more granular look at it and bringing on a land planning expert with, my suggestion was a minimum of about 10 years experience that could help guide us in the right direction and produce something that is going to be the most beneficial for the Village Center. And that land planning expertise, I think, will become very important towards the process. I've done a lot of planning, done land planning, but I'm not a land planning expert, as probably most of the people that will be there from the staff standpoint. So I think it's important that that person would be there.
Well, I will be frank and say I completely disagree with the effort. And while I appreciate staff's willingness to dive into a relatively complex subject, I have two concerns. My first concern is, I'm not going to speak for county planning staff, but I will say right now, my city planning staff, we do not have the expertise and the capacity in-house to get the desired outcome for the Ladies Island Village Master Plan. And so I think we need an outside expert, similar to the Boundary Street Master Plan, Boundary Street Redevelopment Plan that we did back in 2005 or 6, Libby?
Yep.
To go to that level of detail in terms of zoning, transportation infrastructure, design standards, how all of these things have to work together to interface to get the desired place. And I don't think neither the county nor the city right now has many of those elements in place, and I challenge our ability to put them in place. My other concern is that the process that's being proposed does not include transparency or citizen input on the front end. And I think Sea Island residents and Ladies Island residents specifically, especially the property owners, need to be brought in on the front end to do public charrettes on exactly what they would like to see in their downtown Ladies Island and Village Master Plan. And I don't like the fact that we have to spend an exorbitant amount of money on consultants and to go through this exercise, which may take a little bit more time. But if we're having a conversation again about spending $200, $300, $400 million on bridges to help manage density, I think it's worth spending $250,000 on a consultant to try to reorganize the center of the island where everybody's trying to get through to make a village master plan. So I maintain that it's not far enough, and we ought to figure out how we work together to bring in a high-level, well-respected consultant to help us organize all of these things. That's been my position for 2+ years now. But all that being said, if county administration and city administration and county council doesn't have a willingness to go that far for Ladies Island, I'm obviously outvoted. So something is better than nothing. So I would support the effort if there's no appetite for going what I think is an appropriate level of planning process like we've done with Boundary Street and other areas of the city.
Thank you.
Yeah, appreciate it.
I don't disagree with the mayor whatsoever. I think I've made that clear before, but I totally agree that moving it forward is important to me. We need to move something forward. And again, that's a discussion between the city and the county as to financially supporting the more in-depth study, which I think everybody would agree is probably something that we would rather see. But it's, to me, spending the last 2 years trying to move something forward, I'd hate to see this just stop again for another 2 years, because then we have no option. Whatever is developed, and that's just the way it's going to be. And I am much more of a proponent to move it forward. If the desire is not to spend the money to go farther, I think the proposal and going forward this far at least gets us to that first step. And I think a report back to this committee as to the results of that effort, the NERP can then make a decision as to whether they would support going back to city council and to and county for additional monies to expand the process.
I think we've got $50,000 identified in this past year's budget that's sitting there. And so the city's willing to put in some money. I know there's a debate about what's the appropriate split. The city certainly has a responsibility because we're on the island, and I think 30% of the corridor, not Ladies Island, 30% of the corridor is currently in the city. So the bulk of it is still in the unincorporated county. The overwhelming majority of Ladies Island and the Sea Islands are in the unincorporated county. So at the risk of saying it's your fault or your problem, I think the bulk of the responsibility falls on an unincorporated county. But I don't want to get bogged down in that, because what's most important is that we bring in citizens, their vision of what they'd like to see in their sort of village center is incorporated in whatever we do. And I think that does two things. One, it's listening to residents, which we have a responsibility to do. But two, I think as we try to make regulatory changes, and whether it's zoning or design standards or transportation infrastructure, it helps soften some of the public pushback that we found on the back end because citizens have been engaged on the front end. And, you know, I maintain that some of these consultants, for better or worse, this is what they do for a living. And they know how to come in, they know how to bring the public to the table, they know how to organize the process to capture that feedback in an appropriate way. And they help us work around some of these legacy, you know, zoning design standard issues and auto-centric, you know, transportation-based design. And we got to move back to more of a traditional city building approach. And I think Ladies Island City Village Master Plan is, you know, ought to be a traditional sort of city downtown at some point over time. Maybe, you know, maybe I'm crazy, but I don't think we're there today.
I guess I'm going to just throw out a kind of playing devil's advocate. We have the right regulatory framework. It's not perfect, but, you know, we have transect zones that bring the development up to the street, you know, require pedestrian-friendly development. We have a, at least right now, as far as moving forward on the Sea Island Parkway corridor, we're looking at a cross-section with, you know, we're not widening 5 lanes. We're looking at 3 lanes, a planter strip, 10-foot multi-use path. You know, so we have those components in place. What would you say the danger if we did nothing? You know, what?
Well, I think the danger we do nothing. So, I mean, this ZBOA issue that we have right now,
Yeah.
right? So here, you know, the current county zoning, you know, with the exception of the special use, right, will allow a high-intensity drive-through restaurant in the heart of what should be the village master plan or the village center, right? That's like putting a chain restaurant with a drive-through on Carteret Street, in my opinion, long term. That's not appropriate.
Conversely,
Conversely,
right down the street is Wendy's, and I'm not arguing.
Well,
I'm
but
just
that's
saying,
past the intersection, right? I think the vision has been from the Publix to the Woods Memorial Bridge is the Ladies' Eye, and then some geography, you know, east and west of there, it becomes the village center. I mean, I agree, the ship has sailed in certain parts of the island, but and it's similar to Boundary Street, right? You see, you know, the Starbucks has a drive-through, but that's, I think, sort of might be one of the last ones, except for how it's designed appropriately. And I'm not just picking on the county, the city, for example.
Oh, no.
The filling station, you know what the zoning on the filling station is, which is in the city?
Yeah.
T5UC.
That's right.
And you know what that allows?
Everything.
A 5-story building. Right? Who thinks a
5-story
5-story building along the corridor is appropriate?
Yeah.
You know, but we've got T4N as the step down, which allows, you know, barely any vertical height, a very limited commercial. So I don't think that gets us there either. And then when you think about design standards of a downtown Ladies Island, do either the county or the city zonings get us there? I don't think so. I mean, maybe I'm wrong, but that's where I think it needs a certain level of thoughtfulness. And given the transportation issues through there and the potential for growth on the Sea Islands, it deserves special consideration.
Yeah.
Compared to some other parts of the county and the city.
I could just, you know, throw in a comment, a couple things in passing. You know, part of the problem is we're being nibbled to death because it's taken this long to get to this discussion. The ZBOA is a prime example of that. Second point that I made at our meeting the other day is I'm not so sure it doesn't make sense to expand our definition of the quote-unquote center from a planning perspective. I would favor looking up, you know, even going up as far as Brickyard Point down to the McTier Bridge and out to the airport and back to the Wood Memorial Bridge from a standpoint of land use planning. Because I think what you do out there on those arms along Ladies Island Drive over the years and up Sam's Point Road is going to affect what happens in the middle of that area. That's just my perspective.
No, and I think if money were no thing, right? You know, taking that geographic area might be a good thing. I'm optimistic that the transportation plans will create some significant relief. I mean, just dumping Beaufort High School traffic out onto Ladies Island, Sea Island Parkway instead of Ladies Island Drive, I think will be of a benefit. So I think we do have to focus a bit. And my personal opinion is the focus ought to be on that core where you're seeing two things. You're seeing the most impacts of transportation infrastructure along there. But I also think a number of those sites are teed up for redevelopment and are either at their end of their service life or underutilized. And given the value of those parcels and the growth that's coming on the islands, we're going to see, regardless of jurisdiction, we're going to see more and more willingness to invest and to redevelop. And I don't think the public set the table appropriately. That's the tension we're seeing with some of these projects right now.
Well, public at the table, I'm not sure. We're getting listened to, but that's another story altogether.
Well, to answer your question, I think that you asked, so what happens if we just let it develop the way it is now? And my concern with that is that what we've been saying for the last few years is that the Ladies Island plan sets a vision of what it's supposed to be. I don't think that what we have out there right now accurately reflects what that vision should be, and I think that we need to reset that, and that's part of this effort, is to say this is the more granular detail of what that vision actually is and how it's carried out. I don't think it's there now, and that's what I'm afraid of, is if we allow it to just develop the way it might develop through other developers. I'm not sure we're going to get to that vision. So, and that's why
I'm not saying things are perfect now. I'm just kind of using that to kind of frame what it is we want to get out of this. And I have to be honest, at the staff level, I'm at a level where I'm not in the decision-making capacity to agree to the funding. And so there's been a lot of back and forth between the city, and the county about whether a project of the magnitude of 200 to 300,000, which, if we brought in somebody like Victor Dover, who did the boundary master plan, that would be a discount rate. And that question just keeps, I feel like it's getting batted around and no one's committing to it. But on the other hand, as staff, I'm very hesitant to move forward with this if there's very lukewarm commitment. And if, we as staff, with the assistance of a facilitator, develop what we see is, if we make these changes to these tools or adopt this overlay, we believe we can get there, but there's, we don't have buy-in, that's a lot of work to do to get to a point where we feel like, there's not strong support for what we're doing. So I feel like I'm kind of caught in the middle. I see two paths forward. One really needs people above my pay grade to come to a decision to commit to a project of that magnitude. And that's been batted around, I would say, since late 2019, and we haven't gotten there. And then the second is, if we all agree that that's not a feasible option, that this is a good step, I'd be more than happy to move forward, because I think we have the right tools that need to be tweaked, versus having to come up with a whole new set of tools. But if we don't have the support to do that, then I would say that's a waste of staff time.
I think what I heard is you need strong council leadership to make it a priority.
On both councils.
Yeah, and I agree with you, Steve, that citizen participation is a must. I think for me, the citizen participation is grassroots involvement. Funding-wise, you're coming through two councils' district, Paul and myself. Can support, and I can't speak for anybody else but myself, even if you got the two councils to support that, funding, becomes an issue with other council members who may not even see a need to spend money. So we got to deal with that. What I hear, the involvement of Beaufort City County Council in this effort, I think we also need to fold in to some degree the town of Port Royal, because they're going to be impacted as well. Now, they may not contribute as much toward this effort and stuff, but I think the three entities should really be looking at this because it impacts them greatly. Alice talks about coming to Publix and not being able to, having a difficult time getting back to Port Royal. And I think we need to really start talking about how do we plan for that area, which will be a vital area in the future for this county and stuff. So I think this committee here could, with the support of the three entities, we should be able to find out how we can best fund this thing here and move forward. I can't go no further than that.
How big is y'all's budget? Approximately.
I don't know.
$100 million, $119 last year, I
I
think.
don't know.
Well, we keep running away from the
Mine's
budget.
23.
We keep running away from the budget.
We spend $150 million of public money every year. And so we're sitting around here kicking the can about $250,000 to $350,000, right? Funding is not the problem. Making it a priority and leadership, and I take responsibility, right? I feel like I failed working on this for 3 years now that we're not further along, and I'm mad at myself.
I hear you, Steve. I'm just telling you that we have to get at least 6 votes around council.
Let's do it. You and I are very captivating personalities that I think we can go meet with our colleagues and make it move.
I don't think I'll be, I think this is a correct statement, but part of the problem is we've never asked.
Well, I've asked my folks.
Okay, well, we've never asked this council. We put $250,000 in the county budget to repair tennis courts. And we're talking about, I believe I did the calculation right, 0.2% of the budget, to fund this kind of a project. But we've never asked and never really prepared the ground to go and make the ask either. It became very easy to say, fine, let's do the Ladies Island plan, and we put up the money, a few bucks, to get that thing done. We've never, ever dealt with the issue of funding the actual execution of the plan.
Okay, then do the ask. I'll do my effort, my part, to garner support.
What would be the appropriate committee for that to come through?
Natural resource.
Natural resource. Alice.
We picked up one other council member there, because I think Alice is in support.
Alice is in support.
Yeah. I think Gerald would support us.
Councilman Mitchell, Councilman Dawson, the in-person folks been doing all the talking. Where are y'all on all this?
Hey, I'm on board. I support you. Let's see what we can do. Let's move forward.
Yeah. Hey, Stephen, as for me, I'd like to have more conversation with the other council members before I go online with my perspective.
And I'll be more than happy to meet with you separately to bring you up to date on where we are if you want.
Mitch, when you say other council members, on city council? Okay.
Yes.
We'll key it up for a work session discussion on our end as well.
Yeah, okay, great.
Okay, I'm not sure exactly where we are. I guess we're kicking this can down the road a little bit here and saying that in the next month, we're gonna have some interaction with each of our county and the city representatives to see if we can pull a vote together for funding for a larger.
How much, what would it take, Rob, for you to make a presentation before natural resource on this issue?
I would have to, this needs to be cleared with Eric, because Eric Greenway has tried to work through this issue.
Yes, yeah.
My last, marching orders were to do the scaled down version. So I'm not going to advocate for anything that's counter to what the county administrator has asked me to do.
No, I think that's
No, you're right.
fair. I think it's political leadership and community leadership that needs to make the ask. And so we will get this on city council work session in the month of February. And I'm happy to make the request to Alice to put it on natural resources in February, or if you want to do it, or we do it together, however.
I think, when is your meeting in February?
We meet the second and fourth Tuesdays of the month.
You gonna do it on the 2nd or the 4th?
I got to talk to my city
Yeah.
manager.
Yeah.
It will most likely be the 4th,
4th?
which would be February 22nd.
Okay. I'll speak to Alice and we'll go from there. And then we may want to piggyback on you. Let me. I'll speak to Alice. Yeah. And ask her what she would want to do, because I know the dilemma you in. Yeah. So okay.
And we'll think, maybe you and I talk about a presentation or how it could be presented, because I don't want to put anybody's staff in a uncomfortable position.
Okay.
And I'm more than happy to help with whatever you guys do.
Okay.
I want nothing more than to move this forward after 4 years working on it.
Just a conversation, and it may be, you may not want to answer this, Mike, but where was Paul? Do you have any idea?
Paul was in support of it also. He was actually on our task force.
Okay.
And I did a presentation for Paul some months ago, just before I presented it here at NERPIC. And he was in support of it at that time.
Okay.
And also, just for conversational information, I think that the entire presentation was sent out to everybody, and part of the presentation had all of the major landowners that I had already contacted that were in favor of moving it forward. So that information is out there, and it could be used in a subsequent presentation.
So let me ask you another question. As one of the landowners, how's that conversation been?
It was real good. He and his wife met with me at my house. He wasn't necessarily going to say, yeah, I want this done or no. His concern was that he had a family compound out there with a few houses. He wanted to keep his family together. I expressed to him that's exactly what I was doing in my property too. Totally understood that. But as to the development's going to happen around him anyhow, his property value is going to go up. What his family decides to do later on in life, is their decision.
But you had the conversation with him.
I've had the conversation. They were not opposed to it at the time.
Okay. Steve, let's get together and we go. Okay.
All right, so we'll get an update next time as to how we're doing with that. The other portion of that, there was a presentation that I did on transportation elements. I know that nobody has money in their budget to establish a trolley system right now for everything. However, we couldn't do that anyhow for a while. The first thing that has to happen is a study. And the study needs to be initiated by Palmetto Breeze, from the best of my knowledge. I'm getting information about a current study that was just done for the airport that would be approximately the same size as this, how that got funded at that point, and what the cost of that was. To the best of my knowledge, that one was about $60,000 total, and it was divided up into portions so that local municipalities paid a much smaller portion of that. But it's in my mind, it's important to try and move forward to try and get to a study point, because that is what would be used to get funding later on if funding becomes available through the federal government. So
when you mentioned the airport, you're really referencing Hilton Head Airport, right?
yes, I am.
Okay.
Yes,
Okay.
Hilton Head Airport. So that's just an ongoing process to try and see if we can't get to a study and get that done for us. Any further questions about Ladies Island? Seeing none, we'll move on. We have a prioritized list of items. We've kind of already talked about one. What's happened is this list of priorities has been modified. It's now the 2022 priorities list. And since we don't have a quorum, I would just ask if there's any items on here that we left on last time that anybody would like to discuss.
I don't have it in front of me, can I?
Sure.
Mike, on number one, I will work with Alice and Rob to modify the wording for number one to include the discussions that we had regarding regional growth boundaries, intergovernmental agreements, and all the growth issues.
Okay, that's great. I appreciate it.
Germaine to a couple of the items, I want to thank County Council for standing up the Capital Sales Tax Committee on Monday, and also including municipal representation. So thank you for including us.
You see that, Mike? Yeah. Go ahead.
And there was one other issue on there that drawing a complete blank now.
While we're looking at that, Alice said that she would like to have us have a presentation next time from Low Country Housing Trust Fund, REPA, and suggested that maybe Tammy Hoy might be somebody that could come and do a presentation to get everybody updated. I know that members have all had that presentation, but it might be good to have it for everybody at NERPIC.
One of the comments I'll make is that I am actually having a community meeting on this coming Wednesday. I can do that as announcement time. I'll do that as announcement.
Whatever, yeah, that's fine.
On the stormwater management came and gave a presentation to Beaufort City Council last Tuesday, I believe, and so we really appreciate bringing the manual over. I think council's generally supportive of adopting it and putting it in place. I think our staff is going to work with y'all to do a couple of analysis on what a few projects look like and to make sure that it aligns with where we're trying to go. But I don't see any issues with keeping it moving and making sure it's adopted so we're all on the same page. But appreciate the county's leadership on putting the manual together and keeping it moving. Same thing with affordable housing. That's probably round table comment. So I'll hold my comment.
Okay. Anybody else have any comment on the, or any items they'd like to add to the action item list? Seeing none, we'll go ahead and move on to roundtable comments.
Just want to make an announcement. I just saw the sea level rise as an initiative. Having a meeting on this coming Wednesday and dealing with stormwater issue in the Eustis, Wausau community because of the lowland issue going forward. And there are some issues dealing with the state as well as the county as far as providing drainage. So we have a representative from the state going to be there, from the county is going to be there, and then I've asked Rob to be there to talk about sea level rising because that's going to be an impact in that community and stuff. So it's alive and well before us right now, and I don't know the answer to any, whether there will be any resolve these meetings, but at least bring it before the folks, let them know that there are some concerns out there and the county needs to address, and the state needs to address some water issue from drainage. Because after a good rain, there are areas of that community that never had water before. They got waterfront property now for a few minutes because and a lot of the water is coming from the highway, from the state 21 improvement. So we're going to talk about that. Yeah.
On March 7th and 8th, the first South Coast Cyber Summit will be held in the city of Beaufort.
Okay.
It's being hosted by the South Coast Cyber Center, of which the county is a member. Alice Howard is the secretary on our board. Port Royal has leadership. I mean, it's really a broad coalition of stakeholders in private sector, education, local government. We've got a whole host of nationally recognized speakers coming to town. The Governor McMaster is going to be the keynote to kick off the event. But folks from the FBI, Notre Dame are coming in to really cover sort of the broad subject of cybersecurity. Because of the sponsors, this year's event will be free. So you can register online at southcoastcybersummit.com. If you just Google South Coast Cyber, it'll pop up. We've already got about 120 plus registrants, so we expect to sell out. But if you have an interest in the subject, or you know someone who has an interest in the subject, hope you will encourage them to attend, because we certainly want them. March 7th and 8th, yes, sir, at Tabby Place right here in downtown Beaufort.
That's over there.
But I want to thank the county for their continued support on the cybersecurity initiative. It is really cooking. The Beaufort Digital Corridor has rolled out their cybersecurity boot camps. We already have 11 students, and I'm excited to announce the majority of those students are women and minorities that have enrolled in the cybersecurity training. Some adults that are retraining to upskill themselves. So it's when we all work together, we accomplish some pretty cool things. So excited about 2022.
Any other round table comments? Okay. Our next meeting will be February the 25th. And I'm open for motion to adjourn.
Let's hang out. There's got to be something else we can talk about. The galley.
We want to wait till lunch.
So moved, man.
Quick, someone move.
All right, second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Although we can't.